Hello, one and all. Welcome back to Retrospective, the show where we speak to various media professionals, journey through their careers, and it's the same two usual faces. It's me and it's Chris. Hopefully that doesn't change anytime soon. This week, and I'm very excited about this one, we've got John Gooden, presenter for the UFC. I'm fanboying a little bit right now. I'm sorry.
Don't be like that. Come on now. You make me feel uncomfortable.
But yeah, man, how are you? How's it going?
Yeah, good. Yeah, it's a nice, beautiful day here, and this is Thursday, Friday is my day where I just come down into my little research centre here, and I can just get work done, do things like this. So it's a good time.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for coming on. This one will be fast-tracked, so it will be released on my birthday. Happy birthday to me.
Happy birthday to you.
For a week's time. But we wanted to fast-track this one because we want to say a massive thank you for all the support that we've had on Derek Ray's retrospective. We've had 200 to 300 views mostly for our retrospective so far, but that one's already hit 700 and it's barely been out. Like, it's not been out 24 hours yet.
Not even a day.
So it's
Sorry about what's going to happen to your stats as a result of moving on.
No, John, it's all good. It's breathtaking. So thank you so much to everyone who's done that. And we received some stats, okay? 72% of you that are watching this aren't subscribed. Click that subscribe button now. Come on, you can do this for me. Just for me. Come on. Look at these eyes. Anyway, Hasan Karim, start retrospective off, mate.
So, give us sort of a rundown of where you're at now, John, and what your sort of day-to-day thing is at the moment.
So I have a 2-year-old she's going to be 2 on Saturday. So my wife and I are kind of juggling responsibilities. We're trying to do family stuff on the weekend still. And then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, my wife was working. She's just been made redundant, but still I want to give her some time to work out what her next thing is going to be career-wise. So then Thursday, Friday, I do my thing. Then in evenings and stuff like that, obviously we're together with the kid all the time. It's just a balance right now. It's just trying to maintain some structure in these mad times. And that's really what we're doing. I'm adding in a little bit of exercise, going out walks and things of that nature, but nothing to what I would normally do. And certainly no journeys on planes to faraway places to go and do what I love.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've started now, so we may as well go back. We're going to go all the way back to the beginning for you, John. What was the first memory of you thinking, I want to go into broadcasting?
I think it was around the time when there was a program called T4, which was a Channel 4 thing. It was for like a really young audience. It's where Dermot O'Leary started, Vernon Kay. I see the young faces in front of me here thinking they have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. But it was pretty good at the time. And I'd found myself in an interesting spot personally where I graduated from uni. I was working in London, City of London, and just became a little bit more confident, knew who I was a little bit more, and really just started to want to become a TV presenter, a broadcaster. I felt like I could deliver information in an entertaining way sometimes, maybe lighthearted, whatever it might have been. And that's when these intentions became more of an objective, an ambition. And I then left the city to then embark on my journey into TV.
Yeah, and how did that come about for you? Were there opportunities given to you? Did you have to go through an application form, or what happened? How do you get into it?
Yeah, TV work historically was always a bit of a who you know type deal, and you would go in as work experience, and you would then just try and prove yourself and find your way around. There's no work experience to be a TV presenter, so a lot of people would join as runners. Go through the researcher route, then maybe they'd get screen tested and get picked up, maybe they wouldn't, and they'd just be the presenter that never made it. So I ended up speaking to someone in the office that I was working at the time in London, and she knew someone who worked on something called The Kilroy Show, which was a talk show with a guy called Robert Kilroy. So very brave, very smart man, but got torn down. There was some racism around. So I can't really remember. Probably controversial. Probably I shouldn't have said that. Anyway, I ended up working on his show for a little bit for free, and apparently impressed. They wanted to offer me a full-time gig, but that show was done down in Elstree, which is actually near where I live, but it's not where a lot of programs are made. I wanted to be in the heart of it, which was Television Centre, White City. So I ended up getting a job with the WATCHDOG show, which is like a consumer affairs program. It's a bit of like a pillar of BBC broadcasting. It's been around forever. It wasn't really sexy. It wasn't something that I wanted to be doing, but it was a way in. And unfortunately for me, to cut a long story short, I ended up working on this broadcast and just found myself increasingly being behind the camera, and then you're sidetracked from what your ultimate goal is, and that's to be a presenter. You don't get reps doing that. However, you are coming up with program ideas and managing that process. So yeah, I ended up falling into that and realized it wasn't where I wanted to go. The money was terrible compared to what I was doing in the city, and my confidence was sort of taking a hit. A few things happened personally, like moving back home with mum and dad. And I left the BBC, went back to the city, and things just weren't working out there either. And life was starting to take a bit of a different direction. I'd sort of shelved any ambitions of TV presenting, thinking that I wasn't really willing to do everything that it took to get there. And I didn't really know how to navigate that journey anyway.
Before Haas goes, I just want to say, if anyone out there calls WATCHDOG sexy, then I'd like to know you. Go on, Emmett.
But yeah, so I mean, you took quite an interesting route from there, didn't you? You became, you stepped into things like being an electrician and stuff like that. From what I've read.
Yeah, so I was in a point in my career where I actually got fired from my job in the city, which I thought was quite unjust. But anyway, I saw my dad. My dad had a successful company, electrical contracting business, and I was talking to him about coming on board and helping with his business, take it to the next level, maybe just be a younger voice in that organisation. And he agreed, but he's quite old school, and it was actually the right call. He said, "Listen, you're not coming in to run the office. If you're coming on board, you've got to go back to college. You've got to train as an electrician. You're going to have to tread the boards like everyone else, and we'll see where it goes from there." And and I did that. You know, I ended up going back to college as like a mature student almost, and I spent the best part of sort of 10, 15 years, I reckon, in and around that world. And yeah, just helped Dad with his business day to day, the running of it, and took it in a few different directions, kept it sort of 21st century, and was very, very committed and ambitious with what I wanted to do in that area. And actually I do miss business nowadays. I don't really do any business like that. And it is something that I do miss. But yes, it was, it wasn't really it was a very hard way of earning money, and the game had changed quite dramatically over the last sort of five to 10 years. So it was a good time to look at something else when other opportunities presented themselves.
Yeah, so from there you ventured to quite a few different sort of destinations, and there obviously went to radio work before you stepped up to where you are now. But obviously you worked through other organisations such as Cage Warriors and those kind of guys. So just talk us through those sort of formative steps to building up to where you are now.
So all of this came about it's not been linear. I've always been into fight sports in general. Like I played a lot of football back in there, a lot of tennis and squash actually, which is what I don't often say to people. but I always came back to martial arts. I did judo, karate as a kid. Then I did like some amateur boxing stuff as a teenager. And then later on in my 20s, after having discovered mixed martial arts, I was attending sort of Muay Thai, then some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then eventually I found like a more local MMA spot, which the second gym I went to, which is who I'm still with actually, David Lee, who is with the UFC. I've trained under him for a long time now, over 10 years, I think. And I got really involved in this sport, and it was a sport that wasn't very well represented. In actual fact, I thought people that were representing it were doing it the wrong way, and it was playing to all of the the kind of negative connotations that one would associate with a combat sport, which isn't for the faint-hearted. And a few things happened, like on my coach's show, a digital network sent a reporter down to do some backstage work, and she, like, I'm not blaming her, but she did an awful job and kind of made a bit of a mockery of the show and the athletes. And this was the sport that I constantly saw getting a bad rap in media generally, and it was populated with incredible people that were becoming my friends and people that I was on the martial arts journey alongside, and they weren't getting paid. You know, they weren't earning money, let alone adulation, awards, recognition, any of that stuff. None of these boxes were really being ticked, only by the very, very few. So there was a long way to go, and I ended up sort of writing within the sport and just doing things for mixed martial arts with my own voice. And that just kept developing, and I got opportunities to do commentary, and that just, the way in which I would research fights put me in front of more people, more coaches, more promoters, and that's how the Cage Warriors opportunity came up, which I'm super grateful for, and to Graham Boylan for giving me that. And then when the UFC was looking to expand internationally, I was probably the most active commentator at the time. I don't think the talent pool was particularly deep. So my arm was well and truly waving in the air, and I took it, embraced it, and I've been able to make a full-time gig out of it.
Yeah. And going back to obviously the MMA and how much the sport's grown, did you ever, when you first came into the sport, did you see that growth and that plan and that forward thinking? And how did you do your bit to implement that into what that has become now?
I don't think I had any plans of where I think the mixed martial arts could be. I think what I did was recognize the incredible talents that were within the sport, the great passion that fans had for it, the misconceptions, and that really is the low-hanging fruit. So then it's just appealing to those notes and helping other people understand them. And it was cool, you know. It was the new kid on the block, still is by comparison. People still don't understand what it is, and the people that are within it. So it's a nice opportunity around the barbecue at like social gatherings. It's like, you know, what are you into? I'm into MMA. Like, what is that? And then all of a sudden you can really dine out and give your own personal perspective on this fascinating sport, which I might add, you know, I trained with doctors in the very first gym I went to. I wasn't with, people might assume that you've got a bunch of tattoos and a skinhead. They haven't. I was training with people of all different creeds, colors, backgrounds, job titles, and it was fascinating. And it was a real kind of community, all training, but also spectating. And it's a beautiful thing. And I embraced it, and I wanted other people to understand and enjoy it as well. Absolutely.
And what we found out from a little bit of research, as we always do, is you go on a vegan diet. You're on a vegan diet.
Yeah.
What do you say that I don't know, it's going a little bit sidetracked. Would you say that it could perhaps assist a MMA boxer if they went on a vegan diet? And what would you say to people if they do and if they don't? Like, what is from a vegan's perspective?
Yeah, I think there are a few answers to this. First and foremost, I think you can adopt, so the vegan thing always scares people, but if you say plant-based diet, which essentially means the same thing, largely, there are a lot of MMA athletes, because we have a very big part of our sport is weight cutting, which exists in wrestling. And it is the practice of dehydrating, almost like reducing your body weight the day before the fight, which is where the weigh-ins are. So you might walk around at one weight, then you get yourself right down low, you hit the scales, you hit a certain weight limit, and then you have 24 hours to build your body back up, which sounds like an insane concept. But if you get it right scientifically and you can still perform really well, then you might have a weight advantage over your opponents. And unlike boxing, with our sport, there is a lot of grappling and you can physically bear your weight on someone. It could be an advantage. You could have more power behind your punches, possibly. Difficult to say. But I think there could be a place, and it has been said, there are certain very popular fighters like Nick and Nate Diaz, very popular in our sport. They might not be full-time vegans or follow a plant-based diet all the time, but I think they do when they're in fight camp because it helps them manage their weight a bit better. So there's space for it there. There's also a really interesting documentary called The Game Changers on Netflix, which was produced by James Wilkes, who's a former UFC fighter, who got a whole heap of different sports stars from Lewis Hamilton to UFC fighters and NFL players. And they spoke about adopting a plant-based diet and how that affected human performance and the science behind it. So rather than try and explain anything in rudimentary, like not as good as his words, I would urge people to watch that. Anyway, it's a really good watch. It's quite an easy watch for people. It's not overly scientific. So check that out. But my personal experiences, I've done everything from, mixed martial arts to an Ironman, and I've done it on a plant-based diet. Food is fuel, plain and simple. If you get it right, then you're going to fuel yourself right, and you can do whatever you want to do.
There's one topic you touched on there, which was weight cutting, which is always, it's quite a subject that garners a lot of debate about, whether people should be allowed to cut, as much weight as they do. I mean, we have sort of a closer to home example you could use is Conor McGregor cutting down to 145 at one stage, and now fights at 170 occasionally. What are your thoughts on people who cut, quite significant amounts of weight? I mean, we've seen, all the scary footage we had with Darren Till when he fought at Liverpool, and obviously the whole sort of drama around when he was missing weight. And when you saw the footage of Chris Cyborg when she was cutting weight as well, and sort of the whole grueling process of that. So I wanted to get what your honest take on what you think of weight cutting and, the dangers of it and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, there are dangers, but I think a lot of the time, especially at the UFC level, people have the resources to get the right people in place to really manage that process. It doesn't always go swimmingly. I don't think weight cutting is meant to be a particularly enjoyable process. Some fighters, like my colleague Dan Hardy, he will talk about making yourself suffer through training camp to put you in a certain mindset. And that goes back to a lot of kind of martial arts thinking, if you like. When you look at the Shaolin monks and people of that, they will, put themselves through hell. We see it in the military. They put themselves through hell to make stronger people, create those mental calluses, if you like. I do, however, feel like the sport will be a more enjoyable place if everyone just signed some kind of agreement, like we're not going to cut weight. We will fight at our natural weight class, because I truly believe that it would just make things better industry wide. It's not to say that everyone's doing it wrong, because they're not. It's not to say that there are some incredible scientific guidance notes out there that help you do this the right way and give you athletic advantages, because there are. But generally speaking, I just think it would be easier if we all said, no more, here are the weight divisions, fight within those, and when we all speak to one another on fight week, you're not going to bite my head off. You might actually be willing to talk to me. You won't look like hell, and this world will just be a better place for everyone. But I don't know, it's going to take a real cultural shift, which may come through the amateur ranks. It might be something that the UFC enforces. I know that one FC have like a dehydration or a hydration testing protocol.
Something along those lines, yeah.
Yeah, but even I mean, I think there are just ways in which it needs to be handled carefully with full disclosure of everything, so that everyone's on board and happy. But there are methods out there. But again, it's industry wide. It's always going to be difficult to get that shift immediately.
The idea of adding more weight classes, do you think that's something that would help out? With the 165, that kind of thing. That's
Not
always
necessarily.
argued for.
No, I still think that people will, if you add more weight classes, it might mean that those lighter weight, heavyweight fighters will now start embarking on a weight cut to get down to a cruiserweight or whatever it might be called, or that 165, which is kind of an interesting one because it's so populated. I do think that there is a decent argument for a 165 weight class, regardless of the weight cutting debates. But you might then get other people trying to get down there from higher up, or they might, I don't know. Fighters are a very unique breed, and they sometimes make it difficult for themselves. And yeah, I just don't know if that's the solution.
Yeah. Moving on toward the current situation with the UFC. I myself am not an unbelievably massive fan. I'm a sort of an armchair fan, if you know what I mean. But I have seen the island, the UFC island, been in the news. Tell me more about that and what's happened with it, and what the UFC are doing in this situation to bring back a sense of normality.
Well, Fight Island, in inverted commas, it's a bit of a trending topic right now, and mostly because none of us know anything about it. Not even my boss at the UFC knows anything about it. That's not Dana directly. It's someone who works for Dana. So Dana, Endeavour, whoever it is, owns an island, a piece of an island, has commandeered an island, and apparently has an infrastructure in place in which they can host events. And I'm very excited to see what this looks like and even get to visit Fight Island. So that's really what it is. The UFC are actually putting on events. They have 3 over the next week or so.
So excited. Excited.
Aren't we all? The state of Florida have deemed sports as essential in these times. So they're not doing anything illegal. They are permitted under state law to be able to do that. But the UFC have always been trailblazers. They've always had to fight against the system, popular opinion. So they're very fluid, mobile, inventive, and they write the rule book often. So they're very used to this. They're very used to similar situations, and now they've established a kind of infrastructure and protocol that they're going to use to keep everyone safe. And that's in place right now. It's happening over in Florida, and I'm sure they'll learn from it, develop it, pull it back, whatever needs to be done. But that's happening right now. So live sports will be on our telly boxes, the early hours, Sunday morning, this side of the pond, and Saturday night stateside.
Absolutely, and it's weird. Do you think that other sports can take from the UFC in creativeness in this situation?
I think that the UFC is unique. I think MMA is unique. It's just 2 individuals. And there isn't so much money involved in MMA that you have lots and lots of hanger-ons, and like people aren't rolling deep 50 strong. Even in boxing at the highest end, it's so populated and everyone's got a hand in a pocket somewhere. Unlike in mixed martial arts, and there's just maybe not the amount of promotions available. Some people have a problem with that, but we're still young. But it means that they can contain it even on an individual event basis. And the other stuff is really just normal procedure that you would do for cleaning an event and just following guidelines. In terms of football's very different. You're going to have 22, 23 people on a pitch, managers, substitutes. All of those people are going to train together. Like really and truly, I could get fight ready with a coach, with one person. I might not be as ready as I want to be, but I could have my coach who could maybe be who might be the same size as me. We could spar, grapple, do our strength and conditioning together, and I could get ready with him or her. It could be as simple as that. Then we turn up to fight week, skeleton crew. The one thing I would say about the UFC, we are getting a bit sort of geeky and technical here. They recently designed and built something called the UFC Apex, which is a state-of-the-art production facility where they can basically broadcast from their offices in Las Vegas anywhere around the world. So they're producers, directors, graphics operators, all of these people, from my understanding, I haven't been there, but I believe that all of those people could be in Las Vegas, which means that they only have to have a few people with boots on the ground wherever that octagon may be. So they are well prepared for this eventuality, although it obviously wasn't by design for that reason.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, a lot of people have been questioning how it's going to work out and stuff. But once you look into sort of the more detailed aspects of it, you mentioned the Apex, of course, it's far safer than, as you said, football would be. It'll be interesting to see, obviously, how Fight Week goes, because Fight Week obviously is massive. And obviously for those non-UFC fans who don't know what Fight Week is, it's, through all the media events and, people essentially congregate in that week. So I'm intrigued to see how that, that's changed up. We've since seen the embedded videos on YouTube and stuff, but how has your role changed with that? Because I know obviously you're a massive part of Fight Week and the coverage.
Well, small part. So I do, we do Inside the Octagon for the pay-per-views. So that's pretty much my involvement. I was actually speaking to BT Sport today. Every now and then I've written a column for them around the fights for the weekend. But that's really it. I do my own. I've got my own channel where I might put together my thoughts and analysis and stats to help people who either want to engage with it a bit more, or betting or something like that. So that's really what I do. But you are right. Like when I'm on the road with the UFC, you go to the hotel and I see a lot of familiar faces. There's some truly passionate fans that I'll always see them at the events in Europe and maybe beyond that. The UFC takes fighters around the city. They do open workouts. They go to radio, TV stations and do a bunch of media stuff. They have their own, the UFC have their own media day where they sort of parade the fighters in front of local and international media as well. So now they're having to do that all remotely, but we're in that age where we can do a lot of these things in that fashion. It's maybe not as nice, but if anyone can do it, the UFC can. The other thing I would say about football, and this is no knock on football, but there are so many broadcast partners, there are so many people that have a say in everything, that it's the boardroom is huge. But with the UFC, they've always been very, very protective over their product. So I'm employed by the UFC, not ESPN or BT Sport. And that goes for all of the other people that do much. So the presentation and the production team, they are UFC people. They're not outsiders. So you haven't got all of these people pulling on the UFC in different directions. Obviously, the partnership with ESPN is very significant and important. I'm not going to downplay that, but I'm trying to compare it to other mainstream sports and how they might work.
Yeah, and I mean, you see it when you actually attend the events. I mean, I've had the sort of the chance to attend it both as a fan and as an accredited media personnel, and you really see how huge the operation is. Like, there's so many different, especially I saw it more so obviously as a media guy, and you've got the marketing team, the PR team are all there, and they sort of guide you through and all that sort of thing, and it really is a massive operation. So it's interesting to see how they've continued to hold that up. Through such an unprecedented situation where human contact's been, minimalized almost. One thing I wanted to sort of move on to from there, and you mentioned it just, was the passion of the fans. And I think it's something that people are starting to notice more so now. And I noticed it definitely when I attended events, as I said, and having attended boxing, football and stuff like that. When I attended the UFC in Liverpool, the crowd there was just, I've never seen anything like that. I genuinely have never seen anything like that. It was terrifyingly loud. And it was unbelievably passionate. But I mean, maybe talk to us sort of about your thoughts on the fans over here. And obviously, people always make that comparison to state fans and the European fans.
Yeah, well, you picked a good one. The Liverpool was fantastic. I was there at that one. I wasn't working it. We were expecting our daughter, and she came early. So I actually had to turn the event down, which broke my heart. But I was able to attend because, as I said, she came early, which meant that I could get along there. My wife wasn't about to drop, and I was going to be across the country somewhere. but there are passionate fans everywhere. I do feel like in Europe, because we are behind the US with our understanding of the sport and its maturation, that people, they want to get also in a European event, you have local fighters from that region early on. So people are there specifically, not just for the UFC, but also for those athletes. And like, if I go to a UFC event, like, I'm there for the first fight, wherever it is. You just do. But in America, sometimes I think they come along for the main card, particularly in Vegas. And I just think that's because they consume the product a little bit differently to what we do. And it's still kind of this new toy over here, whereas it's a little bit further down the road stateside. But I could echo that sentiment to Australia and certain parts of Asia as well. They're brilliant crowds. Brazil, incredible. I've had some fantastic experiences on the road. Korea sticks out. The Irish fans are quite simply just unbelievable, unreal, yeah. Like, amazing passion. Liverpool, as you said, was very, very good. Everywhere you go, there's an insane amount of noise. It's just whether they keep it going the whole time, whether you get just constant cheers, whether they find the bad guy as well and they give them some booze. It really is something that the fans get into, and they play such a big part. People don't always talk about this, I guess, but my job gets easier if the fans are good, because you can't help but feel the energy in the room. And when you consider just the geography of how these arenas are, the octagon's right in the middle and the seating is then arranged all the way around. And I'm right there by the octagon. So all of this noise is hitting and traveling through me. And you can't help but be energized and just inspired and encouraged to lift your performance to echo and sit in tune with, like, the chorus of the audience.
Yeah, you mentioned the commentary gig there. Just cutting from you quickly, Chris. You mentioned the commentary thing there, and I've always wondered this. Obviously, being so close to the cage, you must get covered in blood now and again as well.
Not covered in blood,
but sprinkled at least.
It's been a while since I've had any blood on my clothes, but I have had a few splatterings across some of my pages. But generally speaking, it's not too bad. At Cage Warriors, we had it a little worse. I think I remember getting some blood on the clothes there. You do sometimes, when you're interviewing, if fighters haven't been cleaned up and they're talking and the blood's there, it sort of sprays a little bit at you. That's unpleasant. But yeah, I mean, it's not something, I'm not particularly queasy, so...
Well, I don't think you if you were queasy, you probably wouldn't watch MMA. Wrong for yourself, as you mentioned, you're right by the octagon, you're right by the action, and it's the same with most contact sports. Do you think that enhances your ability to commentate on it?
Yes, 100%. I will still try and do a job if I have to do it remotely. I will still try and artificially bring the energy to the room, because I've done radio gigs for 5 Live, and I've done those from London for fights that are going on stateside. So you have to really immerse yourself in the fight, be present, and then just try and deliver that. But that is more of a skill, if I may say so, and a technique, rather than something that's just natural because you're in this wild environment and you're just being like everyone else. You're in a little booth with someone else or a couple of other people. So it does feel a little bit contrived, but not, because you are excited about the fights, but you can't feel the energy. I'd like to do a radio broadcast from Octagon side, so I'm hoping, fingers crossed, I'll get to do that in the future. But yeah, there's nothing quite like being at a live UFC event. It is such a unique experience for everyone. And it's one of the things that I fear about most. Listen, my job, one day I will not be doing commentary for the UFC. It's going to happen. Like, I'm not going to be 80 years old and it's still going to be my gig. I just wonder where I will be able to get that kind of feeling of a fight night. I don't know where else I'll get that. And I think that's why a lot of fighters themselves struggle with that process of winding down their careers, because the energy in that room is like nothing I've ever felt before.
We saw it with Daniel Cormier, didn't we? He said he was going to hang the gloves up. Supposed to hang the boots up. Wrong terminology. Hang the gloves up, and he says openly, he says there's nothing like the feeling of walking out from that curtain and seeing the crowd and obviously the cage.
Yeah.
And we've seen it numerous times, obviously, with fighters who have stepped away and then they come back. In the latter years, we saw it with Liddell and Ortiz, of course. That third very controversial fight in that sense.
Sure.
What's your thoughts on stuff like that, really? Because I know a lot of people, they're not really for it. What were your thoughts when you saw that? I mean, that fight in particular, I guess, is probably the best example of that.
Yeah, I wasn't really interested. Wasn't interested. Of course, I was like, I've watched it and everything else and probably indulged in it a little bit, but I didn't need it to happen. I think fight sports is different. It's not a kickabout. These guys have taken damage through their careers. Athletically, you get to a point where you just can't perform like you used to. And I do feel like you can damage your brand, if you like, because you still are a personality. You still have so much to offer after your fighting career as a coach, as a pundit. There are avenues out there for you. And to keep trying to come back, sometimes it's quite sad, and you have to try and understand the reasons why. And I'm kind of the last person to tell someone, particularly a fighter, what they should or shouldn't do, especially in MMA where, you're not getting footballers' money. But I do think there are times when you hit a certain age, and if you've had a certain type of career, where like someone close to you needs to be putting a hand on your shoulder and just saying enough. And you just wish that there were, and it doesn't happen that much, but you just wish there were more people around those individuals that were saying no.
Yeah. And from that, for yourself, when do you think, and it's a long, long time away, obviously, but when you say you get the buzz from the fight night and stuff, when do you think that you'll realise that it's time for you to stop being involved with it?
Probably when I'm sacked. Yeah. No, and even if I'm sacked, maybe that happens next week, and that doesn't mean the end of it. I don't know. I really don't know. It's not something that I've considered. My wife and I were talking about retirement ages and really boring financial stuff only this week. And she was saying about like 60. Oh, yeah, I want to retire 60. And if I'm honest, when I was in a more business-focused world, I would look at it and go, yeah, I want to retire in my 50s. Now, I don't want to retire. Like, why would I want to stop this job? I could do this kind of thing, or give analysis, maybe, thoughts, opinions, or swap seats with you guys. I can do that when I'm in my 70s. I can't see why not. So I'm happy to keep on going.
Absolutely.
How do you feel it's going to change over the years? Because obviously media is a very quickly changing field. What do you see the future in the coming years for that sort of thing is?
Oh, that's a good question. And if I'm honest, I'm more of a sheep in that sense. I don't ever feel like I don't have TikTok. I heard about TikTok a long time ago, and I'm thinking, should I get TikTok? No. And then, should I get? I tend to jump on these things a little late, and I'm not always down with the kids. But I think there will definitely there's a lot of room with the broadcast, the UFC broadcast, I think, with enhanced technology and how the cameras operate, how we can, visually, how the fights can look, how close you can get to it, what you can hear, see, feel, that just really encouraging the senses. My job, I think I'd like to think my job is fairly safe as a role of a commentator. I don't think a machine will be able to really do justice. Of course, we have gaming, and that's pre-recorded stuff laid on top of it. But I don't think an AI is really going to get emotion like what we can actually convey. So it might have been a decent career move in that sense. But I really don't know. I'm excited to see where it goes. My career, as we've talked about, has meandered wildly between industries, let alone within broadcasting itself. So I'm excited about the future, but I'm not in a hurry to move away from what I'm doing right now either.
Yeah. And finally from me, I'm sure Haas has a few more questions for you. If you could talk to yourself before you got into the broadcasting industry, what advice would you give?
I think there's a couple of things here, really. And it's funny, you guys were saying you heard me on a podcast before, and I've genuinely I really enjoy giving talks to like at schools and speaking to the next generation, if you like. I find it really rewarding, and it's a compliment that people would even want to hear from me. And I have been considering putting together like a commentary coaching style course. Interested to get your thoughts in a second on that. And it has made me think about a few different areas of this. And I feel like talking back to myself, probably to be patient is one, to be present as well, and sort of not worry too much, not always worry too much about the future. And it was very difficult for me because I wasn't 22 trying to become a sports broadcaster. I was in my 30s with a wife. We were trying to start a family. I had a mortgage, like adult problems. And it wasn't so easy for me to lay it all on the line. And it was a bit of a pipe dream in many senses. Like, what are the odds that a guy from near Watford will be able to be on a UFC broadcast where at that time, there are only 2 other people in the world that were doing it, and maybe only about 5 that have ever, not even that have ever done it. So it really was a bit of a long shot. But another thing is to sort of trust your own instincts, and I think that comes down to authenticity. You got to be yourself. You got to believe in what you're doing. And you're going to get a lot of people telling you that you shouldn't do something, that you're bad at it. But also, you've just got to filter a lot of that stuff out. So I think there's just a couple of things there that I would offer up. And that's just I know that I didn't deal very well with the whole social media environment and how people so quickly can give you either positive or negative feedback on your performances. And I probably spent too much time in like trying to process all of that. And yeah, the worry around that sort of thing. So anything that would mitigate that, if I could go back then, I think I would have less grey hair.
Well, you mentioned obviously the feedback thing there, and obviously you get it kind of from both ends. You can get it both from the fighters that you're working with, because they can easily just turn and get quite annoyed quite quickly, as we've seen, it's happened before. And obviously from the social media aspect as well. So how have you sort of learned to deal with that, over time, with being so much more accessible, not just to the public, but with the actual personnel that you work with as well?
I think it is really just realizing that this is the world that we live in. So acceptance and time allows you to just get a little bit more used to these things and grow a thicker skin and really understand. So at first, there's a bit of a panic around the amount of notifications that I was getting compared to like normal life blew my mind. Like, I would get a few people reach out to me on my birthday, but suddenly I'm on a UFC broadcast and it's like bing, bing, bing. But you're like, holy, like, what is this? How do I deal with that? Because I'm also not one of these people to sit there and go, look at me, I'm so popular. And I didn't do it to be a leader in a popularity contest either. It is nice to know that people appreciate your work and that they enjoy or respect what you do. And I still enjoy that. But you do sometimes have to look at people who are critiquing you, both positively and negatively, and think, what do I do with this? Because someone might say that that they think that I'm brilliant. And I'm like, well, I know I'm not that. So, but then equally, you'll have someone who'll say, "You are like like a disgusting human being," blah blah blah, and then you're like, "Okay, well, I'm not that. Am I that? I shouldn't be." And I shouldn't question things like that. But then there were little cultural differences. Like I remember one situation I'll let you in on. There was a fighter, Niko Masoke, Swedish fighter. I think it was Bojan Velickovic. We were in Sweden as well. And he gets his bell rung. So he's rocked and he is literally stumbling around the octagon. And I don't know where it came from, but I said he's doing the chicken dance. Now, I didn't follow up with laughing about it. I just saw it as, and I don't know where it came from, but it just obviously in my mind, it reminded me of a chicken dance, not in like a caricature way. And I think people understood what I was trying to get at. And the UFC social media actually like they clipped it up and put that out there, which in a way makes me feel like if I say something that offends people and the UFC don't like it, I'm like, oh my God, not only have I offended someone, which is really high on my list of that is not where I want to be with it. I'd rather not say anything than offend someone. But then I might lose my job over this, or I'm going to get a stern talking to. I don't want to be in that situation either. But in Sweden, their interpretation of that was very different to what I was trying to convey. So I had people sending me messages going, next time you come to Sweden, we're going to find you, we're going to stab you. And Jesus. You're like, wow, okay. So whereas I might be like, nah, that's negative feedback, not listening to it. Now I'm thinking, right, it obviously means something, because it wasn't just one person. Not that everyone wanted to stab me, by the way, but I was getting some real negative stuff back from Swedish fans. And I was like, oh, okay, so there's something within culturally there that I have to look out for. So I then addressed it, and I spoke to Niko as well. And I actually took him a week before he responded. And I really liked the guy, I really respected him. And that was the most important thing to me, that he wasn't upset with the commentary. So I sent him a note and just told him honestly what I was trying to do with the commentary, why I did it. And he just sent me one back again, it's cool, bro. And I was like, okay, now it's time to address it with the wider fan base. And so, yeah, it wasn't meant in that sense. This is where it comes from. And that's sometimes how you have to approach these things. Some of them are throwaway comments. You're like, that's bullshit. Sorry, I don't know if we're allowed to swear.
Yeah, it's fine. It's cool. It's cool.
So you just think like, you're just trying to get a bite out of me, and I'm not going to take that to heart. But some people might have something that is worth diving into. There's things about my performance that some people might like, and I'll never be able to satisfy them. But then some people might say, you did something there and I didn't like it. And I'll go, you know what? I try to ram a square peg in a round hole. I think I'll change it next time. So it's you mentioned that obviously the chicken thing, and this is something I learned from obviously the infamous McGregor-Khabib rivalry, when obviously Khabib called McGregor a chicken post UFC 205. Right.
Initially I thought just a silly little insult, doesn't really mean anything, and I think I watched a YouTube video, and chicken in Russia or Dagestan per se means something much worse than what it actually sounds like.
Yeah.
So do you find now when you travel to different countries, you look into sort of the cultures a little bit more, so you fully understand?
Yeah, you got to be careful. And the territories that you mentioned, again, like politically, there's a lot of stuff going on in and around Russia, in and around parts of China. We might have representatives from those regions, and we don't really want to get into political debate. And I'm not a journalist by any stretch, but I do like telling the story. And sometimes I feel like you have to edit yourself because of these sensitivities, which is absolutely 100%. Again, going back to it, it's not about me getting out these lines that I'm so passionate about. It's about representing mixed martial arts and the athletes, and however we best do that so that we can all carry on our merry way and we grow the sport. That's the best way forward. But sometimes being one of those people that enjoys getting deep into the detail, it does actually uncover a bit of a hornet's nest, which might be a good thing, because then you know not to go near it.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously with cancel culture being such a big thing these days, I'd imagine it's avoiding banana skins is probably one of the most terrifying things in positions that you're in. So the final little tidbits for me then, more sort of MMA related questions. Obviously the event coming up this weekend. What are your expectations with that? I know you like to avoid predictions, so I'm not going to ask your predictions on those.
Yeah, I think we're up for a legendary event. It's obviously just one of a kind for obvious reasons. It's going to be a unique viewing experience for people. It's going to be very quiet in there, which means we're going to hear things that we don't normally hear, which I think we should embrace. Cornering, breathing patterns, the emphasis of the strikes, it's going to be raw. So that's a side of things that I'm interested to see how that comes through. But when you look at the matchups themselves, and if there are any people that aren't really into the UFC thing and are still watching me and listening to me talk here, you really couldn't pick a fight card which has such a great eclectic mix of fighters, but exciting fighters that are going to keep you engaged. A lot of strikers as well. Not a great deal of wrestlers, which I have no problem with, by the way, but I know that new casual fans are not quite dialed into the nuances of the grappling. And the main event, we've got two pieces of gold. We've got an interim title, the main event. We've got the bantamweight gold between two very, very unique characters. Dominic Cruz, who's an analyst for the UFC, and Henry Cejudo, who's an Olympian, former gold medalist. We've front to back. When you look at the card and unpick it, guys like Jeremy Stevens, a wild man, and Calvin Cater, just brilliant, beautiful boxing from Boston, hard-nosed fighters going toe-to-toe with one another, and some other great martial artists up and down that card. It really is. Oh, and some of the scariest human beings in Francis Ngannou and Rosenstruik, some of the biggest Goliaths that will be throwing their bones at one another. Terrifying. So tune in. If it's the first one, give it a go. You haven't got anything else to do at the small hours on Sunday morning, or record it and watch it just after. But it's going to be a heck of an event.
And my absolute final question, I promise. So obviously we've seen Dana talk about Masvidal and the potential of a McGregor fight. I know he's sort of strayed away from it. Fan of that? Think it's possible?
Yeah, why not? I'm a fan of any Masvidal fight. I'm a fan of any Conor fights. Put them together, look at the BMF title, and you give yourself a hell of a marketing and PR campaign behind that one. Yeah, listen, I like fights, and it kind of makes sense in a way, right? We don't know what's unraveling around the title picture for welterweight. We don't know where Conor fits into the lightweight picture right now, but obviously we've got interim gold, and then Khabib will come back. I would imagine he fights the winner of the fight on Saturday, and Conor will maybe challenge in there to become a contender. I don't know how it's going to work, but those guys need to keep busy. That's an interesting matchup of styles, so take my money.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's my final one. I promise that's my
There
final
we go.
one.
There we go. And thank you very much, John, for coming on. It was a real pleasure. Really good to learn about UFC, and I'm actually very interested now. I'm going to go watch that one on Sunday. So,
good.
There we go.
My work here is done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just before we go, tell us where we can find you on socials and stuff like that.
Well, it's always John Gooden UK on all of them. I'm most active, I guess, on Instagram and Twitter. I am developing my YouTube channel, which I've just rebranded as John Gooden UK as well. There's a load of content on there now. I've done some fun stuff with my daughter and my heartbreak around the UFC event in London being cancelled, which people have enjoyed. So yeah, there's a bit of stuff. Even the vegan stuff's on there as well. So there's a little bit for many different traits of my personality. So yeah, subscribe and just interact. If there's anything you guys or any of your viewers want to know from me, just hit me up. I'm pretty accessible. I like to think anyway.
Yeah, no, we definitely were when I pinged you a message on LinkedIn. So yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I'm
Absolutely
doing a lot
perfect.
of stuff on LinkedIn now as well. I like that. You know, that allows me to put long videos out there, and I don't think there are many people in sports using it as a platform. I'm not going to pretend to be far ahead of the game with social media, but it just seems like it's a good place to go and hang out sometimes.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Drop us a subscribe, please. And yeah, because there are 72% of you that are not subscribed, so please go do that for us. Thank you again for the support on Derek Ray's video, and we will see you next time.
Thank you very much.